Okay, so we're in Siman Kuf Zayin, and it's talking about basically a case that's brought up in the Smag about some fish. But before we get to it, I want to just remind us of some things, also because Sarah's here, and also because these are relevant things that we have discussed in the past. And for example, when we have some background information, min b'mino, mina Torah. What's the din? If we mix things of the same species from the mina Torah, batal b'rov, exactly. How do we determine what is considered the same species, the same type?
That's a machloket, right?
Yeah,
there's an
okay, go
opinion
ahead.
that it goes according to the taste, and there's an opinion that it goes according to the name.
What does the Ramah say?
I don't remember.
Anyone remember?
The
He's
name?
Bat Hashem.
He said name.
Right?
The Ramah surprisingly says Bat Hashem. It goes after the name. So why is this relevant? Why am I mentioning this?
Surprising, because that was Rava's stance. So it makes sense to hold like Rava over Abaye.
Saying it makes sense. Hold like Rav over Abaye.
Yeah.
Yeah. Rav is Surim, right?
Like you could argue that the principle itself, the position makes less sense than Abaye, but it makes sense that the Ramah is paskening like Rava.
Right. I mean, it's certainly not intuitive. It fits to our rules of Gemara. I mean, and there certainly is an opinion, right? There's an Amara that says that. So, it's hard to understand exactly what it means, but actually fish is a great example of that. Somebody once pointed out to me that in the Torah, there's many, many words for birds. There's many words for animals. In fact, sheep, you call it a Rachel, a Tle, Kevis, Kivsa, Kevis, and Kevis is like two different ways of spelling Kesef, and also Kesef, whatever. There's many words for animals. The only word for fish in the Torah is dag. Even when a whale swallows Yonah, it's called dag gadol. And they just have no other word. They call it a big fish. I mean, there is a mention of Leviathan, but it's not in Bereshit. But that might be not a fish. But there's no word. So fish are fish.
This is continued in Jewish life. Every chasna you go to, they say, "Do you want the chicken,
or
do
the
you
fish?
Want the beef, or do you want the fish?" I'll take the fish.
Exactly.
You haven't got beyond it. Okay, I'm sorry.
Whenever you remind me of a joke. They go to Shemayim, and then I don't know. The Brisker Rav goes to Shemayim, and they say, "Oh, welcome, Brisker Rav. We're gonna have a big suda for you to welcome you." And they offer him, "Would you like the beef or the fish?" And he says, "Well, wait a second. Who's the shochet?" He says, Aaron Akohen. He says, "Aha." And who did the malicha? Who salted it? He says, Moshe Rabbeinu. And Brisker says, "You know what? I'll take the fish." So anyway, the joke is that, anyway, you got it. I saw some laughs. So fish. Yeah, so fish, we go after name. Actually, and they say, I think tilapia, they in New York, there was a big scandal that they're selling all kinds of expensive fish and they're actually just serving tilapia or some very cheap fish. So could be that these little fish that the Smag is talking about could be min b'mino. Of course, they're little fish, so maybe they're minnows. But but they're little fish. Maybe they're min b'mino. That might be relevant. I'll just keep that in mind. And therefore, they might be batel birov min ha Torah. So that we'd only do Rabbanan, you need 60. Another question. What's just this regular bittul yavesh? What's the din of bittul yavesh? In other words, dry pieces that mix together. What's that din?
It's easier to take them out, so you can just take it out.
No, you can't. Let's say you can't tell. You can't tell. If you could take it
But
out of.
also, I mean, if you can't, if no makiro, it's batel barov for min b'mino, and min b'she'eno mino, it should be batel barov, but it's shishim like gzera atu min b'she'eno mino.
Right. So by min b'mino, it would be even the rabbanan, it would be muter barov, but by min b'she'eno mino, there's a gezerah that because basically you might cook it together and then they'd have the flavor. Okay, very good. And last question. Irui from a kli rishon, pouring out hot liquid from a kli rishon, is that considered cooking in the new vessel? Is that considered not cooking in the new in the second vessel? As I pour hot, hot non-kosher food onto kosher food in a bowl in a second kli sheni, and it's directly from the kli rishon. Is that considered bishul or not bishul?
The consensus seemed to be not bishul for the purposes of kashrut. It's unlike for the purposes of Shabbat.
That's kind of what we were saying. It's sort of like not bishul, but it does mavliu maflit. Well, so the only thing is I don't know if we discussed this last week or 2 weeks ago, but in Kuf Hey, which we did last couple of weeks, the Shach says that I'm in Kuf Hey, Shach number Hey, so 105 Shach 5, which is I think Sif Bet. He says Va'anu kaimelan l'chumra de irui de kli rishon mivashel k'dei klipa. That it does cook k'dei klipa. Actually, that's an important word, k'dei klipa. But that's so it's k'dei klipa. It's not really bishul, but it is. Maybe that's what you said, Yavni.
Yeah, that's what I meant. That it's not really bishul. Yeah,
not really bishul, but it's used right. Right. It's mivashel k'dei klipa. It does cook k'dei klipa. So that's also relevant with these fish pouring on. All right. So somebody want to tell me what? Well, first of all, we have this case. Let's turn now to the tour. Let's look at the tour and just read the case as it's described in the tour because there's a big discussion about what this case is. So turn to Kuf Zayin in the tour. I was in the Shulchan Aruch for a minute there. And here, Noah, why don't you read the tour? Oh, your microphone is not good. Or at least to me, it's not good.
What about now?
Not really. All right, you don't have to read then. Here, Asher, you can read. Or Isaac, you read. Isaac. Let's have Isaac read. Sorry, I'll get you. Don't worry, Asher, I'll get you.
Anti-Semitism. Okay, sorry.
Okay. כתב בספר המצוות, דגים קטנים שנתבשלו ונמצא בהם דג טמא, יש אוסלים אפילו מקירו וזרקו, ויש 60 לבטלו. Okay, so in Sefer HaMitzvot, he wrote that if you have small fish and then you cook them and you find a tray fish inside the tiny fish, there are those who say that it's aser even if you can recognize the tiny fish and get rid of it. And there are those who say that you need it just, if it's batal b'shishim, it's okay. Okay.
Wait. Yesh. How do you translate? Yesh osrim afilu makiro v'zarko v'yesh shishim levatlo. Where did you see the other opinion?
Oh, I see what you mean. It's aser even if there's 1 to 60.
Yes. In other words, we're done with this. In other words, you're cooking a pot of fish, like sardines, and one of the sardines is actually a baby shark. You know, it's actually a baby shark, and it looks like the sardines at first, and then as you're pouring it out, you notice that one of these fish is actually a baby shark, not a daddy shark. If you know that song.
Yes.
I have small kids. Anyway, so it's a baby shark along with these sardines. So the baby shark is going to trafe up all of them, even though there's 60 against it. So that's very weird, right? Should be 60, should be bata.
Yeah.
Afilu makirov zarko, you take it out, and there's 60, it's usher. Why? Lefi, so agreed on.
לפי שמערה מים חכמים, לפעמים בסוף העירוי, אם מעט מים נשאר הדג טמא, אם 20 או אם 30 דגים, ונאספו וחוזרים המים ונוגעים לכל הדגים. Okay, because when you're pouring the hot water, sometimes, like when you're almost done pouring, you have just a little bit of water left, and the tray fish is still in that itty bitty bit of water with, say, 20 or 30 kosher fish. And so then it makes all those 20 or 30 fish tray, because there's not like 1 to 60. And then the water comes and touches all the fish and then makes all of them tray.
Right. So this is kind of like irui. I mean, it leads.
Well, it says specifically irui. It's not kind of like it's.
Well, yeah, you're right. Why do I say kind of like it? Because maybe it should just be klipa, maybe. But nobody is saying that. They're saying it's totally us. Maybe presumably, I mean, it would be hard to take a klipa off all these fish, but it's like irui, whatever. It's a kind of case of irui, and it's ruining the other fish that were first poured off because it's hot and it's touching. We'll have to think about why exactly it's us. But yeah, okay. V'yesh matiri. First of all, this whole thing that you just described is only a possibility that this happened. We don't know. What we actually see in front of our eyes is an aluminum tray that we poured everything onto, and we see one little shark in there. And we're just imagining maybe how it got there was through a staged process, but we don't really know. This is all just a chashash, a worry. Okay, now read on.
ויש מטילים מפני שאותם 20 או 30 שנשארים בטלים ברוב תערובת, כי לא שייך לומר בריאה לא בטלה אלא בבריאה שנאסרה מחמת עצמו, ולא שנאסרה מחמת בליעת איסור אחר. Okay, so there are those who permit it because those 20 or 30 that are left over are batal barov, or sorry, yeah, the kosher fish. So that makes it batal barov.
In other words, how many fish are there total?
So there's 21 or 31 fish.
No, total.
Oh, no, pardon?
Total.
Total, there are like at least 61. Wait.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, but yeah, let's 61. Yeah, okay, say like that. Yeah, at least 61.
I think I was trying to do the math on this. I sort of thought for this to work, it needs to be more than like double.
Yeah.
So imagining a lot of fish.
I imagined always like 100 fish, but why do you say what's the math? Because
the math I was thinking is like when it gets down to less than, like, I don't know why they're listing 20 or 30, but like what in theory, when it gets down to less than 60 to the one tameh fish, then already it's being contaminated. And so then
now there's the worst case. The worst case would be like 100. Exactly. The worst case would be that 59 became usher because of that one fish.
Right.
And then those 59, how would they be batel? They'd only be batel in 100, no, in another 59
right.
or another 60. So it'd have to be 119.
Right.
That would be like kind of the worst case, kind of. I mean, but it could be another case. It could also be a case where there was only where you poured off. Oh, you're saying
the point is if you're pouring off
you're saying once you
progressively,
poured off 2 fish, if there was only 62 fish, and you poured
Right.
off 2 fish, the 3 fish, it would already
then
become
you're
usher.
already right. Exactly. That was my math, but nobody seems to think that, and everyone's talking about 20 or 30. So I'm not sure.
No. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. Everyone is thinking that. Everyone is thinking that it's a lot of fish, that it's 100 fish or more. We're talking about like a huge factory where they're cooking a lot of fish.
Which is lots of really little fish.
It has to be between like 61 and 120 fish.
No, but the point is, if
It has to be more than
61 fish, it could
Well, no,
be
because
that the minute
there were
it could be that everybody would say it's
120
usher.
fish
then.
would be fine because the ones that became why?
Because the minute you pour it off, what Yazi is saying is, why do we worry about 20 or 30 fish? What about 59 fish? That would be the worst case. I had 62.
Right, that's why if you had 120 fish, then you would have 61 not usher fish and 59 usher ones, and you'd be fine.
Exactly. Yeah. That's why I said 119. I said, but yeah, exactly. But if you had less than that, it might be usher even according to the second opinion because
right, exactly.
Because the minute you pour it off 3 fish, then all the other ones are treif. By the way, this is teaching you an interesting point, which is like, even though you have a bittul in shishim, the way you relate to it now after that can recreate a problem. In other words, it's because you poured it off in stages, kind of, you can create a problem. That's what we talk about. Like the best solution is to pour cold water into the fish and cool it all down, and only remove things after everything is cold. By the way, another point that you should be, what if I take a non-kosher, I take this shark, this baby shark, and I put it into a pot of 59 fish. I hold it by its tail and I put it in, or I drop it in, and then I take it out again. And I put it in another pot of 59 fish. And then another pot of 59 fish. And I go around to hundreds of pots with this one fish.
What are you doing?
Why would I do that? I'd have to be pretty crazy. But what would that do? So it would ruin all the pots. Even though you might say, well, wait a second, how could it? All the pots together are, thousands of fish. But each time that one fish went in, he was not batel. And the amount of flavor that exuded from him is unknown. And therefore we assume the worst, but we assume the best. We assume that it all went out and therefore it ruined it. But when we take it out again, we assume that none of it went out and that it's still all there. And then we go to the next pot. So we have this kind of problem. Except that, right. So that's kind of, so he says it's mutter. Why does this second case say it's mutter?
Because you can't say, because a bria is not betela, except you can't say that a bria is not betela unless you're talking about a bria that's aser on account of like what it itself is, like that the bria is inherently.
Right. So he's saying first of all, exactly. So he's saying first of all, these 30 fish are not considered, but no, they're not considered not batel because of birya, because birya doesn't apply to them. Because even though they are a birya, they're a whole creature. We learned the halachas of birya, that only a birya that is essentially usher, like a shark, is gonna be batel, if not batel filu ba'elif. But a birya that just is usher because it absorbed non-kosher flavor, which is what these 30 fish did, is not really called a birya. So therefore they should be batel b'rov, or batel b'rov, batel b'shishim. That's another question. Why are we talking about rov? Why are they batel b'rov? How can we possibly say that they're batel b'rov and not shishim?
Because it's yavesh b'yavesh.
Because once you've taken out the baby shark, then you've got min ben mino, and the ones that are batel are batel mechamat b'liyah, not mechamat atzmo.
Are usher, not right.
Right, they're asur from Chamat Bliyah, not Michamat Atzmo.
Right.
And so that
So
already has a
therefore,
different status.
But I'm saying,
and it's min b'mino.
what I said in the introduction, we talked about like how could you get a case of bittul barov? It's only a case of yavish b'yavish min b'mina. So you have to say that these fish absorb shark flavor. So aren't they min b'eno mina?
It depends on your definition of min b'mino, which we also discussed. Is it the name or is it the
Well, right. So if you say all fish are the same, then fish are fish, then it's min b'mino. And you have to say, and if you say it's dry, even though there's some water there, why is it dry? Why is this
because you can
dry?
you can pick out the individual pieces. It's not
right.
like
It's not really right.
It's not like a mixture.
Mm-hmm. Right. Even though there's some water there, and if you're talking about it being a liquid, okay. I mean, if you're talking about a liquid, then it's batel b'shishim probably, because the original. And what always bothers me is the original shark is only one fish, and there's 60 against it. There's 70, 100 against it. So why? And so if you're talking about the tom of it, it's batel. No.
Except that when you're talking about irui and you're putting in the hot water, then you start getting to the fact that this is fish that's cooking and there's a pipua, which we also discussed in buffet.
There's a pipua, no, there's the flavor?
Because fish have oil. Fish are oily.
Oh, that's a good question. If this
and so when you pour the boiling water on, then it starts spreading the oil, so the beetle starts to spread throughout. That's how I understood it when I was learning it.
Saying fish are fatty. There is an opinion like that. There's one of the Achronim that says yes, the fish are fatty, and that's what's going on here. We're actually roasting these. They're dry. All right, but wait, let's just finish the tour, this section of the tour. Okay. So he says they're not a birya, and then he has to go back. Ve'ein chozrin, continue.
Yeah, ve'ein chozrin ve'oslin. השאר שבמחבת, אף על פי שנוגעים בהם המים, לפי שאיסור הנבלע ואין איסורו מחמת עצמו, אינו חוזר ונבלע ביבש, כי אם על ידי בישור. Okay, so it doesn't come back and make the remaining fish aser that are in the pot, even though it touches them, even though the water touches them. So like, because in
other words, we're saying it's dry, even though we should say it's wet, because there's water there.
Right, because the Isur is absorbed, and it's not Asur on account of like what it itself is. So this is back to the birya question, right? That we say that birya that becomes
Didn't we say that irui is mevashel kedei klipa? We just quoted the Shach as saying that. What's he talking about here?
Right. It's not universal there, I don't think.
In the matirim are only because irui is not anything or not. Is this different from a normal case of irui?
Well, the whole question. There's also the whole question here, Rav Nachum, of like, where are the fish in this case? Like the tourist case, I mean, this is the debate between the Bach and the Beit Yosef.
Yeah, we're gonna get there. Yeah.
It's not very clear what's going on, at least to me. Like when I read the tour, I'm not sure I know exactly what his, like the actual case he's talking about. Like, where are the fish? Are they in the Machab? What's in the Machabat? What's in the Kara? You know, like it's not a clear case of, is it because of Irui or is it because the Easter fish gets left behind in the Kli Rishon and is still cooking in the water?
Well, I think the simple, without getting into too much complexity, for fish, the assumption where I'm going with here is that the fish remained in the back of the pot with some water, with 20 or 30 other fish, and those fish are ruined. But they might get a chance of being re-allowed, becoming mutter again, because they're poured into this other pot with more than 30 fish, and they're batel barov, because they're min b'mino and they're yavish. But now we're dealing with the question of the tam that's in the fish. And why doesn't that tam get into all the other fish and ruin them? And you can say, well, put it this way. Either you should say that it's bishul. And if it's bishul, then the flavor gets spread out everywhere. In which case it would be batel. Or, right, because there's more than 60 fish against the original shark. So it should be bishul. Or you could say, no, it's not bishul, it's nothing. It's klisheni ain't mavashel, so it's nothing. So then it's also mutter, because just that one fish is also and everything else is mutter. And even the 20 are batel against the rest, even the 20 or 30 are batel in rov. There's a third possibility that it's not that it spreads everywhere, and it's not that it spreads nowhere. It's that it spreads, but in an indeterminate amount. Kind of like what the Bach says. I mean, like the Shach says, that irui creates spreading of flavor, but it's only klipa, and we don't know exactly where, we don't know how much. So therefore, we can't use the kula, as I'm saying like this. With that opinion of the Shach, that we hold like Rabbeinu Tam, that irui is mevashel, k'dei klipa, is on irui klirishon, is only l'chumra, but not l'kula. So l'kula would mean, it's called bishul, so it spreads everywhere. So we're not allowed to use there's a certain kula of bishul, because if I put this fish in a pot of 100 fish, then because it's bishul, it's batel. But if it would be irui, then it would ruin things, would ruin klipa. So we're not allowed to say that it's fully bishul in the sense that we would allow it to spread everywhere. On the other hand, we don't say it's nothing, so therefore it ruins all the fish. So then I still don't understand these words. Let's go back to the words. Vein chozrim ve'osrin shar shebemachvat. In other words, machvat, I think he means the aluminum tray that you poured everything into.
I think the machvat is the kli rishon, isn't it?
No, the
don't we
machvat,
usually
the
come out of
kara
the
is the initial thing everything's in. The
I
machvat
agree.
is like the thing we're pouring stuff in.
I don't know. Well,
I thought it was the other way.
you think the machvat is the original thing, but then it's strange because we already said that they did ruin the 20 or 30 that were left in the pot.
Yeah, we talk about putting it into the machvat, so I think it goes from the kara to the machvat.
Exactly, that's what I think. I think that the machvat is what I'm calling an aluminum tray. It's something that you pour, you don't cook in, it's something that you pour into after you cook.
I think you're right.
I think that's the way to read it. That's the way I want to read it now. Ve'ein chozrin ve'osrin ashar b'shebemachvat, afal pi shenogin behen hamayim, even though there's hot poured water there, lefi she'isser hanivla. Now here he says like this: lefi she'isser hanivla, ve'ein isur machmat atzmo, ein ochos. I think what he's saying here is a big chiddush. I don't know if anybody says this. This is my chiddush. My chiddush of what his chiddush is that isser nivla, that when Rabbeinu Tam says that irui from Kli Rishon is mevashel, he's only talking about something that's isser mamash, not something that's usser because it has an bilua in it. And that's what the Torah is saying here, or that's what the matirim that the Torah is quoting are saying here. They're saying, afal pi shenogim lefi she'isur hanivla ve'ein isuro machmat atzmo. It's just an absorbed isser. That kind of thing, Eino Choser v'nivla, in a case of irui, which is what this is. B'yavesh. Chozrim v'nivla b'yavesh. I don't know what yavesh is, but maybe it is yavesh. Maybe the water is gone. That's like the bach. Ki'im al yedei bishul. Only by bishul do we say that a belua can go further. But maybe that's what he's saying. That irui doesn't cause balua to go out again. and do the second stage of osuri. Okay. So does somebody want to tell me how? So I said, how did I explain this? I explained this, I think, according to the Beit Yosef. Is that right? Can somebody tell me outside how the Bach understands it? The case? Somebody mentioned the Bach before, so somebody's ready. Just Joel, maybe. Did anybody take a look at the Bach? A little bit?
So the,
Sorry, what about the Bach are you asking?
Well, you see, this case is the Smag, and the Torah brought it pretty much as it's written in the Smag. Question is, what is the case? We have the words of the case, but what exactly is the case? I explained it according to the Beit Yosef. Anyone? Now the question is how. I don't want to go back and go over the whole case again, but the Bach understands it completely differently.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, still pretty bad.
well, so the Bach
Complain to Apple.
understands the fish that are left over,
Go ahead, Isaac.
the fish that are left over in sorry?
The floor is yours.
Oh, okay. So the Bach understands, the Bach says that the first pot that you cooked all these fish in, you pour out all the water into the second pot. So what's left over in the first pot, there's no water at all. So it really is yavesh b'yavesh. Which is weird because the Torah seems to be pretty clearly saying that there likely is water left in the first pot.
Well, you have to add that there's a bit of water in the first pot, but Rav Nachum, you're on mute.
I thought the Bach is not saying that you poured off all the water. He's saying that some water remained.
And so he says, right? No, it was earlier. Yeah, he says ve'im ken dato stream shema besofa yirui nishara daga tamaim esrim o shloshim dagim im me'at ma'im v'nesru chulam ki ha'mayim chamim olechim azatam bechulan b'toch ha'machavat. By the way, he for sure thinks the machavat is the kli rishon. Speaking of which, but
Right. So what's the problem according to the Bach?
No, I think
What
he
is
thinks
the
the
real
machavat
problem?
is the machavat is the second kli, but I think he's worried. He's saying you have to do iru, you have to pour all the water out, because if the water then goes into the machavat, the second thing that we're pouring stuff into, then how can we say they'll be batel barov because it won't be yavesh b'yavesh?
so I'm going to prove my point. I'm just going to read it. Right, Bior Tavar. This is the beginning of the Bach. At Dvarim, delachar shnipatu dagim me'ara hamayim chamin min hamachavat l'toch kli acher bli shum dagim u'me'ara kol hamayim. Right, kulam shebetoch hamachavat l'toch kli acher v'lo nishar shum rotev b'machavat. Right.
So wait, that's what I said. Nishum. There's no
Yeah,
water.
but it says ve'im ken data osrim shema besofa yirui nishar hadag tameim esrim o shloshim dagim im me'at ma'im. He says there's a little bit, right? You're essentially trying to get rid of all the.
Right.
I'll do this, right? You try to.
Now you're trying to do it right.
Yeah.
You're trying to do it right. You're trying to pour off all the water quickly, and then you know all that one fish won't have a chance to ruin everything because he'll be left dry, high and dry, and he won't have an attack, have a way of passing his flavor to the other fish more than he's already done in the cooking. In the cooking, it was batel, and now it's just going to stop. It's going to freeze. It's like you instantaneously freeze the mixture by pouring off the water really quick. But the problem is a little bit of water remains and ruins 20 or 30. Okay, go on, Joel.
Oh wow, I stepped into that, didn't I?
Yeah.
Molchim azatam bechulam betoch hamachavat ve'im bahem shishim levatel ve'achar kach kesheme'ara gam otam me'at ma'im v'lo nishar shum ma'im b'machavat nagu otan esrim u'shloshim dagim shene'esru b'shar kol hadagim b'shar
In the shebe machvat.
Yeah.
Now you pour off the rest of the water And then you see when you're pouring it, you're tilting it, and the water is coming out. And then then it ruined a few, and then you flipped it over again and shook it down, and now everything got mixed up, and that little fish is essentially touching every single guy in the pot enough to ruin each one of those pieces, even though there's 100 pieces. Because you shook up the pot, basically. And not just the one touched, all the 20 touched. Now, yeah, right. So what we're saying is that these pieces became usher. And because of Balua, not just the one fish ruined everything, I take it back. All 20 of those fish ruined everything. We're not worried just that the one touched everybody. That's unlikely. But we're worried that the 20 touched all 100. Enough of the 20 touched enough of the 100 to ruin them all. So this is talking, we're worried that Balua went into the fish, and then that Balua went into the other fish. It's like a double jump of Balua. Why is this not Hanan? Is this Hanan? Is this Chaticha Naseh Nevela? It seems from the fact that the Tur is quoting it that it's nothing to do with Chaticha Naseh Nevela, because the Tur holds, what does the Tur hold about Chaticha Naseh Nevela in Shar Isurim? Doesn't exist. Now I'm going to say something nobody says that I found. What does the Smag hold? Bashar Isurim? Does anyone remember?
I think he does hold Hanan, doesn't he?
He does hold Hanan, exactly. He does hold Hanan. So, I mean, nobody says this, but this is sort of an interesting observation or an opportunity to explain the whole case. Maybe everybody misunderstood everything. And really, the Smag is only saying this because of Hanan. And the Tur has no business quoting it. And he's ruined everybody's struggling to figure out what this case is and how does this work? And it really only works logically with Hanan as your basis. Now, nobody said, none of the Achronim that I saw say this, but I did notice that this is the Smag. I thought, oh, this is the Smag. He holds Hanan. So let me be clear. Nobody understands this to be talking about Hanan, because why would the Torah be quoting it? Why would the Beis Yosef be relating to it? Who all don't hold.
The Bach seems to be saying that, right? Is what you're saying. Like the image he's setting up sort of requires it, even though he doesn't say it.
No, not necessarily. You could say it's not Hanan. You could. I asked the question, why is this not Hanan? And I didn't leave enough time for you to explain to me why it's not. But you could say it's not Hanan because it's just flavored in one, jumping from one to the other. It's not Hanan. It's not becoming more. That Hanan says it's like it expands in its volume. Nothing became more voluminous, if that's a word. Nothing became larger.
Otherwise, it would be about Tabashishim.
No, again, because dry, we have this problem like we learned before about roasting. If you or like I said before, if I take a fish and put it in a pot with one other non-kosher fish, and put it in a pot with one other non-kosher fish, and keep going around to many, many pots of non-kosher fishes, I can ruin 1,000 kosher fishes with one non-kosher. So once it's dry and it's no longer bishul, I poured off all the water and I shook up the pots. The fish are jumping around, touching each other and ruining each other, but not spreading throughout. They're just like touching. There's a momentary touch, and a little bit of Isser got onto it, and I don't know where that Isser is, so I can't eat the fish because there's some Isser somewhere in there. It's not bishul. What I'm saying is like bishul is a kula. Bishul is a kula. Bishul says, you know what? We're going to make a kavia. We're going to make how do you say that in English? I don't know how to say it in Hebrew. We're going to make an official statement that when you drop that fish, that non-kosher fish, into the pot of 60 and it's boiling up, it's not going to just ruin the one next to it. It's going to spread everywhere evenly, and therefore everything will be kosher. But we don't have that right to say that when it's dry. And that's what the Bach is saying. You poured off all the water and you shook them up. Now you don't have a right to say that. It doesn't spread evenly everywhere. It spreads a little bit in everybody. All right, that's enough. That's enough of the tour. Basically, it's not an easy case to understand exactly why there's Isser here. Why there's this? In other words, it's hard to understand why the matir, and it's hard to understand why the osrim oser. The din logically, in my opinion, should be you remove klipa from all of them, except that the klipa would be very hard to remove. And there's actually a Ramah that says that we'll learn later. We didn't get to, where she says when there's lots and lots of klipas and you can't remove them and they're all mixed together, you can call it batel also. But all right, this case is hard. But this case, exactly what happened is not so clear. Let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. So let's go to the Shulchan Aruch. Well, I sent you guys some questions. Yeah, actually, before we go to the Shulchan Aruch, well, we'll see it in the Bach, I guess. Well, obviously, we'll see in the Shach. But there's another opinion that says that's Rabbeinu Shimshon. Does anyone want to tell me what Rabbeinu Shimshon says? Noam says it's all permitted. Rabbeinu Shimshon says it's all permitted. Yeah, but so does the Matirim that the two are quoted. Why is it all mutar? Noam says we assume that the usher fish went with the majority. In other words, it's kind of like quantum mechanics. We assume that at all moments, that fish was always in the majority. When it was in the pot, it was in a majority. It was with the majority in bata. And when you, of course, wait a second. It went with the majority. What if there was only?
Is that when like the Shach was quoting the opinion? He says like Tolina and Beruva. That's what he's referring to. Rishon's
Yes.
opinion.
Yes, Tolina. You're tole. You assume it's in the rove. I make these obscure references to quantum physics. It's just because I assume everybody knows quantum physics. But the idea, what I meant is that the electron, magically jumps from one place to another. We don't have any explanation of how it does that. So the fish somehow, when we were pouring, kind of like the picture that the Beis Yosef describes, when you were pouring, it was in the pot. It was with 60 other fish. And the minute you got 60 into the aluminum tray, well, now it's over there. And therefore it's batel over there. So it's never in a case where it's with less than 60. Of course, this only works if what's the numbers? How are the numbers going to have to be, Avni? How would this work numerically? What would the case? When would it be us? When would this not help us? Put it that way. It certainly wouldn't help us if we only had 59 kosher fish.
Also, if we like noticed the tame fish, like when we had already poured some of them out.
Right. Well, that's for sure not the case. For sure, the case is they're
then
all
we can
in
like
the tray.
the way a lot of them were describing the case, that seemed kind of like how it was. You're kind of pouring it out and you're like, fact. Yeah.
We're after the fact. It's all the fish are together. You're saying you maybe noticed it going from one pot to the other. I don't think it. No, I don't mean that. I mean like what numbers? What if we had only, let's say, 63 fish? Would it still work there? Let's think about that.
It's kind of hard because, right, like obviously if you have exactly 60, that's pretty difficult because no, there obviously is going to be some probably.
No, because it won't work at all. It won't work at all. It won't work at all with 63.
Sorry, if there's exactly 60, if there's exactly 61.
But even 63.
No, I mean, theoretically, if they're actually, yeah. I mean, it depends on if you think it's poured all at once, right? Yeah. But then this becomes a confusing shita because it's like, at what point, at what number of fish do we think it's plausible enough that it could have shishim at all times? And depending on how many you pour at once and whatever, and
my point is like this: it's with the rove is fine, but what if the rove is only 30? What if the rove is only 45? Now, what if it's 90? So I poured off 45, and now I poured off 46. So it's now with the 46, but it ruined all the 46 because that's not the rove has to be also 60.
But I think
it only works in a case of 120.
Maybe, but this is also the question of like, if you're pouring it, bevat echad, like, is that really ever a time like where they're in separate, or is it like you consider it to be like that they're all together, in this pour, and therefore you don't really need to have 120 or 121 really, right? So.
Right. You're saying a different point. You're saying just pour it really fast.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of Lexi's point, which I think the Bach also jumps on the Beit
That's-
Yosef. He says, "Wait, what do you see? Like, where did you get this idea that there's two pours going on here? Right? There's one pour."
No, but even according to the Bach, there's two pour. There's two there. As you're pouring it, you tried to do it in one shot, but a little bit. He says 20 or 30 got ruined. Also, he agrees with that. All right, let's read the Shulchan Aruch. Now he jumps to the case of eggs. Now the case of eggs is actually brought in the tour we didn't see as being the same as the case of fish, more or less. The only difference is that in the imagination of the case, usually you cook, like the thought is that you cook 120, 140 fish, but by eggs you might really only cook 60 or 65. You're not going to cook that many.
We found it. We were kind of puzzled by this case because we found it difficult to even imagine. Like, I don't really know enough about their little fish, so like I'm not a body in that. If they tell me they usually cook.
We lost you, Lexi, but I know what you're saying. You're saying you can't imagine cooking 60 or even 50 eggs. So it has to be, it has to be like for a wedding feast or something, yeah. Where
You have to make them like really hard boiled, because like even I feel like when people are doing like industrial cooking, you generally don't want to make that many eggs at once, because like depending on how you're draining things and taking things out carefully, you're going to be leaving a lot of them in.
Yeah, I agree with you, but that's why I say there's a distinction. All of this seems kind of irrelevant. I never cook, sardines, and I never cook 60 eggs. So this is all, but really what's important about this Siman is that it is applying some of those principles that we have come in contact with. It's applying them to a case. The case, however unrealistic it is, it still allows us the opportunity to apply some of the things that we know. But I agree with you. It seems strange. So the eggs is the same thing, except that basically you're cooking 60 eggs and you see a little beak sticking out of one of the eggs, and you realize that it's probably not kosher, and you are worried that it's not batel, even though you have. See, if you didn't have 60, if you had only 50, then the whole thing is ruined. Doesn't matter. You don't need to enter into these stories. But if you had 60 or you had 61, would it still be mutter? You think it would be mutter, but maybe not. So let's read the Shulchan Aruch on that. No, maybe Lexi, you'll read the Shulchan Aruch.
Sure. המבשל ביצים הרבה בקליפתן, לא יתם המים שנתבשלו בהם עד שיצטננו, או ייתן עליהם מים צוננים לצוננם ואחר כך יוצאים, משום דחי שינן שמה ימצא באחת מהן אפרוח, ואם היה מוציא מהם קודם שיצטננו, שמה הייתה נשאר אותו שיש בה אפרוח עם האחרונות והייתה סרטן,
Now, beautiful. Notice that this is one of the cases where the Shulchan Aruch just cleaned up everything. He gave us a case that's a little bit more realistic. It's eggs. He told us an eitzah of what to do. And then he said a simple reason why he didn't talk about pouring. He just a simple reason. You take out 3 of the eggs, and now you don't have 60 anymore. Right? You came in with your tongs and you pulled out 3 eggs.
Yeah, I mean, he just kind of like removes all the question. Yeah, he removes all the question of irui and how that impacts things.
Exactly.
It's just you're like.
Right. He's just saying the principle is that we lose our 60. We had a 60 and we lose it. Things go back and become usher again now. Without getting into all these complicated details of even, of his argument with the Bach.
He also seems to be disregarding another one of the arguments we saw earlier, which was, well, if you're pouring out most of the fish, then there's a good chance that the little shark was in there. He's saying it doesn't really matter because there's the where was it? I just lost my place. The Shema Chayshanan. Yeah, Mishum Chayshanan Shema Yinsa Be'echad Menafroch. So he's saying even if you took out the majority of these eggs, there's still a chance that the egg with the afroch is still in with the smaller amount. And that was sort of my understanding also when we were reading about the fish was it's the Shema the Chayshan and Shema Shemitzah.
You're saying he's giving you a rule that's always applicable. It's
Yeah.
always, whenever you're cooking more than 60 eggs, you shouldn't take them out until they're cool because you might ruin it. When you're cooking 20 eggs, so doesn't help you any. You may as well pour them out because they're all ruined anyway if when you open one of them, you find a chick in there. So,
Yeah.
so they'll all be ruined anyway, so it doesn't matter what you do. But when you're cooking 60 or 61 or 62, whatever it is, I think eggs actually 62 you need. So when you're cooking the eggs, since you have an automatic head there, even if you do find a chick, therefore always add cold water or always don't take them out until it cools down. Okay. Now read the Ramah. Lexi.
אם לא עשה כן, אלא הראה אותן לקרבה ונמצא אחת מהן טרפה, יש אוסרין הכל דחיישינן שמא הטרפה נשאר לבסוף, ולא היה 60 בקדרה לבטל, נאסר מש בקדרה וחוזר ואוסר כל מה שבקרבה. So the Ramah kind of brings back the complications that the Shulchan Aruch got rid of. Right, so he brings in again the idea of this kind of like pouring and basically sets it up as a very similar idea to what we said with the dagim. And so he says, "V'chein b'dagim k'tanim shenimsa dag tamei b'ka'ara v'lo era kulam b'pam achat el toch ha'ka'ara v'az yesh l'chush shema nish'ar ha'isur lebasof v'yesh matirin b'chol inyan de lo machazkinan isur lamar nish'ar ha'isur b'lo shishim." Right, so that's like the Shimshon opinion that it's like we just like abide by this chazaka that like the isor was always with shishim. Vafilu l'dat hosrim in le'esvar kelim shnit b'shlu bo d'ma midin hakliya chazkato. So even if you don't hold like Rabbi Shimshon, you still like don't say the kli itself has become aser because it's like the chazkat kishirut.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So he basically avoids this problem by saying we're just going by this Rabbeinu Shimshon, but he changes the words a little bit. If you know, well, we didn't see it inside. But all right, let's go. Let's look at the. Actually, let's take a break for 5 minutes and come back at 10, and or 10:01, and then we'll start with the Shach. Okay. The Aruch Shulchan gives you his take on things, but it's, he was a great Magid Shir in Volozhin. So I think in Volozhin or wherever he was. So it's good to have a good shir with him. So I want to share my screen and look at the Aruch Shulchan. There. So I just want to point out that we saw the heter and the mutter, the mutter and the usher positions that the Torah brought, but those positions were based on the mechanics of the case. In other words, the pieces touch or they don't touch, or is it dry, and so maybe it doesn't cause a problem. Right. The second opinion was that it's dry, it doesn't really cause a problem. The Rabbeinu Shimshon is actually a third opinion, which is saying there's a whole different way to look at it, and that's talking about chazaka. So, just a second, I turn off something. Oh, sorry about that. So let's read. I'll read to you a little bit the Aruch Shulchan. He says, "V'hine atur lo hevi klal haheter shel Rabbeinu Shimshon." He doesn't bring at all the opinion of Rabbi Shimshon. Mitam. Oh wait, is this the best mitam? Actually, maybe I should go back a little bit before that. Wait a second. All right, well, let's just read here. Mitam de iser beruba ita ela haheter mipnei bittul barov. He never brings the opinion of Rabbi Shimshon, who says that the heter, that the iser is always with the rov, like I said, like kind of quantum mechanics. He just brings the heter because of bittul barov. V'zeh lo shayach ela b'dagim ktanim shemevashlim b'ribui. Like we said, you'd have to have 120 fish in order for this. I'm sorry, I read a little bit wrong, but you have to have 120 fish for the Rabbeinu Shimshon thing to work, because the rove has to be enough to also be 60. V'lo b'beitzim, and it won't work with beitzim, which you don't usually cook that many. V'zehu dat Rabbeinu Abeit Yosef b'sif Aleph shekatav hamevashel beitzim harbe b'klipatan lo yotzi am hamayim. You shouldn't take them out of water if you cook a lot of eggs. Shedit bashlu behen ad sheyitztanenu, or ad sheyiten aleihem mayim tzonanim l'tzonanam, or you cool them with cold water. V'achar kach yotziem mishum dechayshinan shema yimatzeh ba'achat mehen efroch, because we're worried you might find a chick. V'im haya motzi mehen kodem sheyitztanena shema haya nishar oto sheyesh ba'efroch ima achronim v'haita osram. And if you don't cool it off, maybe the forbidden one will remain with the other eggs and ruin them. Lefi shelo haya nishar sham shishim, because there wasn't shishim, there wasn't 60 there. Levatlo ad kan l'shalom v'lo katav klal din dagim. He didn't say anything about dagim. He just talked about eggs. Mishum desfirele kedata matir, because he holds like the data matir, not like Rabbeinu Shimshon. The dagim mipnei shehem beribui va'isur batel berov. Ma she'ein came bebeitzim she'ein mevashlim beribui kol kach ve'ein rov heter levatel et isur. So by eggs, that's what I was saying to you before, that the eggs probably you don't have enough. V'atam shelo eskim atur v'shulchan aruch la'atir leheter shel Rabbeinu Shimshon. So why didn't they agree to Rabbi Shimshon, who says just go after, say that the heter is always in the road? Nira desfirle adarabah. They feel the opposite. Kevan the isura beruba ita. If the isur is always in the row, im kain kol dag shelokeach me'akidera ad mechetze nomar de isura beruba ita v'nishar adayin ha'isur bekedera. So the isur, every time you take out fish, you take more and more fish out, and the isur is over in the pot. Va'afilu im yesh ribui dagim, even if there's many dagim, kol kach shegam b'machzit yesh shishim, even if you have 120, so that when you take out half, there's still 60 there. Keneged atamei lechen mimechziva elach nomar sha'isur beruba ita klomar v'kvar nitla atamei. Now you're going to say once 61 or 62 are in the pouring off tray, that the heter is over there. V'hi bein harov shenitlu me'akidera harei gam b'zeh nuchal lomar adarabah. But we can say the opposite. The called dag v'dag sha'anu motzi'im. We might say like this, that each fish that we take out, me'akidera, mistana hi meruba. We have a klal like this, called a porish meruba porish. Anything that comes out of the majority. So every time we take a fish out, we assume that it's part of the mass. In other words, if I grab a person from a crowd, presumably he's an average representative of that crowd. Each time I do that, I can say he's from the rove. So each fish is from the rove, which means he's heter. So again, it's probably from the majority. And therefore it's kosher. As long as there's still 3 fish left in the pot. We go after Rove, and we'll still say, so there's 3 there. So when I take 1 out, I'll assume it's kosher, because 2 of them are kosher for sure. So now I've got 2 in the pot, and 1 of them is not kosher. Umay chazit lomar isura beruba ita. Why should you say that the isura is in the Rove? Nomar the kol netila miruba nitla. V'lechen ein raya mizvachim. Mishum de bekan nochal lomar rov echad rov acher kmoshe katuv va'od de b'sham perish Rashi de ein heter al atzman ela al, this is not important, ela al tarovet she'achar kach ein sham shehiksha ahach zvachi misham. I think it should be gufa mechavit shel truma de lo talinan beruba v'tiret sham sheyesh chiluk bein perusho lelo per bein perusho lelo perusho. Ubakan have a perusho. In other words, it did come out. Vamrinan beruba ka mafrish. And we say it came out of the majority. Ayin sham. So wait a second. What did we say before? Let's review what we said before. He's saying like this. He's saying, you want to tell me that it's in the majority, the fish is over in the majority, but I will say that each time I take 1 out, it's the mutter one. So then once I take out enough to leave only 59, then all the 59 will be treif. Each time I took out one, so it was kosher. And by the end of it, I'll have, at a certain point, I'll have 59 in the pot with the 1 non-kosher one there, and it'll be all treif. So I'll have 69 kosher ones. So and then I'll pour them into the pot. So he's saying, which is more important? Which rule is more important? That the isser, which chazaka is more important? That the isser is with the rove, or that the isser is with the isser is with the rove can create 2 different possibilities. Either it means it's always with the rove, in which case as I keep taking 1 out, it's in the rove there, and each time I take 1 out, it'll eventually work its way down to 59 and ruin those ones. Or I'm going to say that it magically jumps. In other words, they didn't want to say that. They wanted to say, no, every time I took 1 out, it's kind of like, it's really like a case of particle physics versus quantum mechanics. In other words, each time if I look at each one individually, I can say that it's the kosher one. So then by inference, the other 59 will be non-kosher. So he goes on. This is all a sugya in the Gemara, which we're not going to figure out right now. But look at this. But now this is what I want to get to here. This the Rabbeinu Rama Katav Alha. The bebeitza shetzarich lanicham. He wrote that the eggs you need to leave them there. Ad shetztanen. This is what we just read. Ve'im lo asakein el ira otam lekara. V'nimsa achat mehen treifa. Yesh osri dekol hakol. Techayshinan shema atreifa nishar lebesof. V'lo hayashishim b'kedera levatel. So this is like Lexi said. He brings back the opinions that the Bach and the Beit Yosef. V'ne'asar mashe b'kedera. V'chozer v'oser kol mashe b'kara. V'ken b'dagim k'tanim. Shenim sadag tameh b'kara lo irak kulam b'pamachat el l'toch kara da'az yesh lachush shema nishar ha'isur l'besof v'yesh matirin here we go v'yesh matirin b'kol inyan de lo machzikin isura lomar. What are we don't say the nishar ha'isur below shishin, that the isur remained without 60. The ken ikar. You don't say that the pots are forbidden. The Ma'avidin Kli al Hezkato al Kalashana. Okay, that's just a quote. V'hine. Who hetir gam beitzim mitam de Rabbeinu Shimshon. So he's saying like this: the Ramah is holding like Rabbeinu Shimshon. The Talina the Isser beruba ita, Ella, but what? Because we hold that the majority contains the Isser. Ella shehiti kavanato mitam delo. I think what he's saying here is he changed the intention of the expression. Shehita kavanato. He changed. He pushed it to the side, like lahatot. Hita kavanato, the original intent of Rabbeinu Shimshon. Mitam de lo machzichin isur lomar. He didn't say we don't. He didn't use the language of lo machzichin isur. He just said lomar de nishara isur below shishim. In other words, the way Rabbeinu Shimshon said it is, he says we say that the isur is always with the majority, and what the Ramah said is we say that the isur is never without 60, is never lacking at 60. In other words, it's a slightly different language. Klomar de lo machzikenu isur lomar sha isur nishar me'achronim. We say that the isur never stayed with the end, b'kedera, and we don't have therefore that problem. El amrinan shebetchila ha'irui nafala isur v'davar gadol diber b'zeh, and he said a great thing in this. Tehine kfar be'arnu b'svar Rabbeinu Shimshon tamua. My chazit lomar isur beruba ita. No mardu kol atila matila. We already said that we had a big problem with Rabbeinu Shimshon. Why did he say? What led him to say that the isur is always with the rove? Let him say the isur is, always not in what I took out. V'lachen piresh kavanato. Therefore, the Ramah changed or explained what the Rabbeinu Shimshon was saying. Devadai mitam zeh ein lehatir. That wouldn't be enough, that simple concept, because why would you, there's the simple concept of saying it's always with the robe is not enough. Mihu al kol panim, kevan sheyesh ruba keneged ruba. I have one rove against another rove. Have a safek. I sort of have a safek. I don't know where it is. V'lachen mukminan kol beitza behezkato. So I don't know if it was in this place or in that place, or in this rove or in that rove. I don't know which of the two. He's saying like this. I don't know which of the two is right. I don't know whether each time I took out it was mutter, or whether it always remained in the row. It always remained in the row. So therefore, I have like a safek, and therefore I can say it's a safek. So when I have a safek, I just leave everything in the status quo. I don't change the status of the egg. Okay, so that's all I wanted to say. You can look at that more on your own, maybe, but what the Aruch Shulchan is noticing is the change in the language in the Ramah, and he's saying that actually there are two svaras to say one would be mutter, one would be aser, and therefore I'm left in a kind of limbo. And therefore, I leave the egg in its original, it's an original status. That's the way I understood it. I didn't give you guys a chance to read it yourself, so I don't know if you have any questions or disagreements. But, okay, so that's I just thought interesting. It also clarifies a little bit because he's saying that it's not clear. He's saying that the eggs are mutter, which is a kind of a bigger chiddush. He's saying, and that he can only create based on Rabbeinu Shimshon, but it changes Rabbeinu Shimshon a little bit. Okay, so maybe Noah, if your microphone is working now, you want to read a little bit the Shach 1.
Yes, it should be working now, correct?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Ein Solin? Oh, that's the wrong Siman. Sorry. All right, I got it. All right. Ve'im lo asachen chule ad sof haga. Nir lefi anut daiti mochach the riba v'sayato shavio hasefer truma v'mordechai sof perek elun tumin, right? I don't know what the perek is
So
in
Park
the Gemara.
Elu Trefot.
Elotropo, right? Shari Dura, Siman Nun Aleph, Smog, Vago, Maimoniot, Torah, the Hecha Dira Harotev Mitchila, Lichli, Velo Hadagim, Afilu Hachi, Kulam Asrim.
Okay, so stop there for a second.
Sure.
Stop there for a second. So first of all, you should write down like this. The first opinion is, we'll call it the Riva, the Riva. So the Riva is, we didn't have names up until now. Now we have names. The Riva is the opinion that it's Asr. And he quotes a lot of other people, but let's call it the Riva. Okay, continue.
Afilu Hachi, Kulam Asrim. Techoshishim, Shema Nishar Hadag Tameh, Tzad Mata, Sof, Ke Shemitmaet Harotev Ayede Uri, Imat Maim, Verotev, Imesrim Oshoshim Dagim, Oyoter, Ad Pachot Meshishim. V'im ken, Nasru Otana Asrim Oshashim, Alpha P, Shemara Lesof, Kol Rotev L'Kli. Kol Otan Dagim, Shechut Rotev, Latzad Ma'ala, Enan Mitzrafin Levatel, Kevan Shehen Chut Rotev. V'achar kach chozrin Otan Hasrim L'Shashim.
Wait a second, stop for a second. Notice he said these words, Ein mitztarfin levatel, kevan shen chutz l'rotev. In other words, what happens is you're pouring off some of the water, so the ones that are left high and dry are no longer part of your 60, but the ones that are still in the water are not, and they are not 60. Now, the ones that are high and dry are no longer going to help you in creating bittul. And the ones that are still in the water are not 60, so you've ushered them. That's the way
he's imagining the Bach is the way the Bach understood it.
Okay, fine. But still, you agree with what I said?
Agree with what you said, but the Beit Yosef is not conceiving of this case.
I'm not so sure, but okay. Okay. Why? Because Beit Yosef is worried about the ones in the tray he's worried about the pot also becoming usher, no?
Right, but according to the Shach, you've already poured out the vast majority of the water, and now you're just that was like the first thing they said.
Right, I'm sorry, but clearly that part is definitely the Bach, right? Right. The Beit Yosef understood that you poured off some of, right. The Beit Yosef understood it a little differently. That kind of it's like a milkshake. And as you pour it off, you pour off water along with the fish. And here it's like the Bach because you're just pouring off water. Agreed. So, but okay, fine. Go on.
ואחר כך חוזרים אותן 20 או 30 ועוצרים בנייתן השאר דגים שבמחבת שמונחים עליהם במחבת בעודם חמים. או שמתערבים במחבת אותם שחוץ לאיסור לצד מעלה עם אותן שהיו במיעוט מיד לצד מטה שבסוף העיר עד שנוגעים הכל זה בזה אם כן נאסרו כולם. So the bottom ones stay in the water. So those, and there's not enough for them to be 60. And then when you flip it, they then usher the top because now they're now in the water.
That's the way we explained it. So now we're going to get to the second opinion. If you're going to write down, the second opinion is Rabbeinu Baruch, Baal Sefer HaTruma.
ודעת רבנו ברוך, בעל ספר תרומה, וסייעתו, שהביאו כל הפוסקים לשם ומסכימים לדעתו הוא. דנהי דאיכא למיחש, דנערו ה-20 או ה-60 שבסוף העירוי, מכל מקום בטלים ברוב. לפי שדרך להיות הרבה דגים קטנים, יש רוב נגד אותן שנאסרו, ואין אותן שנאסרים חוזרים ואוסרים השאר בגנייתן. וכיוון דאין איסורן מחמת עצמן, אין חוזרים ואוסרים בלא הרוטב. Commotion Nipar Basiman Kufay Siv Zain.
Which is where we talked about right, which is where we talked about roasting.
Right. Ukvar Yira Kol HaRotev Lebetuf Kli Ubekara Leka Roke. Inami Harotev Shebekara Kvar Nase Kli Sheni Veina Oser Kla Kamasha Amar Basiman Kufay Saif Katan. Hey, Imkan Lo Nitarvu, which is the shach that we were referring to beforehand. Imkan Lo Nitarvu Ela B'yesh Uvetelim Berov. You want to keep going?
Yeah, so that's the heter opinion, right? Because although we still I don't quite understand the heter opinion, but in other words, he's saying it didn't cook. It's klisheni, and klisheni doesn't cook. Kind of, that's what he's saying. That's the second part. And the first part was, he gave two reasons. He says, because the Isser is not Mahmat Atzman, Ein Chozrin v'Ozrin below Rotev. They're, which is what we learned. In other words, without fat. Here he's learning that it's not fatty. In other words, if you have two hot things touching each other and they're just balua be'Isser, it doesn't transfer at all, unless there's some fat there. And so these are not fatty, so it doesn't spread. And also it's klisheni doesn't cook. Okay. Although klipa, I still don't
like
see,
in two
I'm always
different
bothered
moments,
by
though,
why
right?
not klipa. But yeah?
It's in two different moments, right? In the first, when you pour out the water, when it's in the Kli Rishon, then it's without the water because you've already poured out the water. And then when you pour it back into the water, then it's
No, I don't
Kli
think.
Sheni. No?
No, I don't think so. Oh, I thought he was giving two explanations for why, when you pour the 20 non-kosher fish that are in the pot with no water, and then you pour them into the, remember you poured off all the water into the separate pot, like the Bach says.
Right.
And now you pour the 20 non-kosher fish on top of the dry kosher fish, and that has no effect because klisheni, or because dry things don't roast, if don't spread their balua. I thought it's both explanations of that same case, two different ways to look at why it's.
But it's the same case, but it's two different. It's like, but it's not. It's like different moments in the cases. Whether the 20 fish become aso when they're isolated with it because there's no water there, and then it's like whether those would aso the other ones. I don't know. Maybe I'm confused.
But I thought remember the box said there's a little bit of water left in the pot, and that's why those ones for sure become aser. In the pot, they for sure become 20 or 30. We're not arguing on what the words of the smog are. The smog says 20 or 30 became aser. That's for sure.
Right. Okay.
Then the question is why those 20 don't ruin it for the rest. And I thought he's giving two different explanations for that.
So then what's the first one?
The first one is that balua doesn't transfer out of something below rotev. Unless, except we have that special, in other words, if you roast things without any liquid, then the flavors stay where they are. They stay in situ. They stay in place. They don't transfer unless they're fatty things. And these fish are not fatty. So they each one remains its own entity.
And we have to say that a little bit of water that's left in the original vessel would not count as rotev.
Right. I guess that little bit. No, I think that little bit. Oh, doesn't that little bit also get poured into the third vessel? It just happened later.
It does. So it does. So theoretically, you do have rotev in that case. So
no,
yeah, I guess you have to.
No, there's three pots. There's the pot that you pour the water into, and then there's the pot that you pour the fish into, and then there's the original pot.
But the original
pot. I thought that's the way the Bachan says it. You're pouring from the original pot into the water, down the drain, essentially. But as you're doing that, some water is remaining a little bit in the pot, ruining 20 fish. Then you keep pouring down the drain until it's all down the drain. Then you take the dry fish and then you mix up the dry fish. And that moment of mixing them up, there's completely dry. There's no water anymore. So that's like roasting. And there, the balua doesn't transfer. And every time I say this, I'm just inside of me is saying, yeah, but screaming, what about klipa? I still don't understand that, but yeah, let's ignore that and just say, yeah, when you dry it, dry things don't transfer at all. That's the material. So that's the second opinion, Rabbeinu Baruch. You know what? Let's stop there, even though the Shach has a lot more things to say. But I mean, at least it gives you the ability to make a little chart if you want to have, you know, the name for the opinion, Rabbeinu, the Riva and Rabbeinu Baruch are the two before we get to Rabbi Shimshon. Okay, so we gotta, because of time, we gotta go further in the Shulchan Aruch. Let's go to Bet. Josh, you want to read Bet?
זבוב וכיוצא בו מדברים המאוסים שנפשו של אדם קצה בהם, שנמצא בתבשיל זורקן, והתבשיל מותר שאין פליטת דברים אלו הפגומים אוסרת. So flies, creepy crawlies, which if they're found in your dish, you just pick them out and throw them, and the tafshil is permitted.
We don't hear you. Yeah, your microphone is not, your internet is not good enough. Wait, Josh, can't hear you. Maybe let Andre read it, because he can't hear you. You gotta find a better internet service provider. Andre, can you read?
Yeah. Did you hear anything?
Yes,
Josh, yeah, we couldn't hear you, Josh.
זבוב וכיוצא בו מדברים המאוסים שנפשו של אדם קצה בהם, שנמצא בתבשיל זורקן, והתבשיל מותר שאין פלטת דברים אלו הפגומים אוסרת. Should I read
Explain.
Fly and crawly things, yeah. And that makes a person verachtlich.
That repulses the person.
Repulses a person, yeah. And it's found in a plate, and then they throw them away. Then the dish is allowed because there is no exudation of these things.
No, because these pagum things don't oser.
Because these things that give a bad flavor don't render the dish prohibited.
Right. In other words, the things themselves are oser. If you had a whole zvuv in there and you didn't know where it was, but the tam of these things that is not oser. Wait, I got to get a electric cord for my computer, but look at Siman 104. What did we say?
It feels like the Yosef Karo didn't really care for what the tool had to say here. So he left it out, but he still felt the need to say something related. So he put something in that doesn't really belong in this Siman. Does it?
It was the tour did it first, right? The tour puts this in.
Well, the tool had something more like had something to said about the kaf and the concern there, which is like more relevant to the topic at hand, as opposed to this, which is just a repeat of what we've seen before.
That's right.
So,
only
right,
the
that- So that's
Yeah.
the part, like the Rabbi Zakar that didn't think that was like relevant at all because of the issue of mi'us. He thought it was like a non-point, and so but he still like stuck something in here just to mimic the structure, even though he didn't actually want it, right? Then the Rama brings it back.
Yeah, I think for the tour, it's just mashma that you just take it out, right? That it's not a problem. It's already in Kuf Dalet, right? But and Kuf Dalet, as we since we're waiting for Rav Nachum, I'll read it again because I think it's worth it. The very end of Kuf Dalet in the Shulchan Aruch, I got to find it again. Right? He says essentially, right? He says Dvarim ha'meusim shenafsho shel adam katsa bahem kinemalim uzuvim v'toshim. Right? So the insects and other things that are disgusting. Shekol dam bodel mehem. Nobody's gonna. Everyone separates from those. Let me use sun because they're disgusting. Afilu davru b'tavshil v'nimche gufan letocho. Even if they're mixed up in your pot. But and remember they're not a birya anymore, right? They're completely like melted away. Im heter ba'alav mutarim, right? As long as there's more heter, they're mutar. Mikomakom kol she'efshar livdok ule'avir b'misnenet bodek u'nesanen, right? But if you can filter them out, he does say. So generally, if you remove it, that's clearly from that the plata is not a problem.
So wait, so tell me what you're saying again.
I was just going through the end of Kuf Dalet, right? See, Gimel, just because I mean, this is really what's being referenced here, right? I think it's the Shach who says that too. So you go see that. But we have like it's a given. Yavni was making the point that it's actually kind of odd that the Mechaber brings this here, right? Because the tour just brings the whole question that the Ramah is going to bring about. What about that spoon that you used to take out that fly? But the rest of it seems to be like that's obvious, right? That we already had that rule. So
okay, well, the tour quotes opinion that the fly will forbid the spoon that removed it from the soup, and the real question is on that, right? Why would it forbid that spoon? So let's so continue. Is it, so actually so why would it so will it forbid that spoon? Because we learned that it gives a bad flavor and it should be bata barov, or it should be bata. So this din is from where? This din is actually from the Sharei Dura and the Rabbeinu Yerucham. In other words, the din, that's what the Beis Yosef says. That's what the Beis Yosef says about the spoon. That the Sharei Dura and the Rabbeinu Yerucham hold that no, the flavor of a fly will forbid a spoon. And the Tur is quoting the Sharei Dura, but is really posting like the Rashba. In other words, in Siman 104, where he says it's really mutter, that's going like the Rashba. And that's really how he posits. And here he's just sort of quoting the Sharei Dura, but not really meaning to postit like that. But if you look at Darkei, let's go back to the Tur. Look at Darkei Moshe 5. Where is that? Let's go back to the Tur. Kuf Zion in the Darkei Moshe. If you read, there's a little parentheses where it says Din Aleph, and then it says Katav the Anan Lo Nahigan Hachi. You see that? I'm looking, it's like, I'm skipping like two lines. And then it says Katav the Anan Lo Nahigin Hachi. Tell me if you got, give me a thumbs up if you got that. So wait, so not everybody. Look in, again, Darkei Moshe Hey. Okay. Gavni, you got it?
No, I have not found it yet. Sorry.
Well, let's start reading it. So he says like this. He says, Anan lo nahigan hachi, ela hakaf asur. He says, really, the kaf is asur. That is the minhag. V'tzrichin shishim neged kol hazvuv. We need 60 against this fly. The locha Mordechai, not like the Mordechai shekatab perak patra davodazar. We can skip all that. The ein sarich el shishim rak keneged hazvuv milvad hefresh sheba. Amnam im nimtza zvuv bekara. Now he says another point. In other words, if you find the fly in your soup, so you need 60 against the fly. Now the problem is when you take it out with the spoon, you don't have 60 against the fly, and therefore the spoon will be usser. But what about if you find your fly in your bowl, as your soup bowl? That would be permitted. Why? Damrinan de lakara nafla. Because we'll presume that the fly was in the air and fell into your bowl, and was never in the soup at all. In other words, if you knew that there was a fly in your soup pot, and you poured directly from your soup pot into your bowl, and it was irui kli rishon, and now in your soup bowl you have not 60 against the fly, could maybe usher the soup, theoretically, because you need 60 against the fly. And the soup bowl is small, like the spoon. But we're going to presume that the fly fell in from the air directly into your soup bowl. And it's klisheni, and therefore it's not going to cook. Shaya klisheni ad kanashana. V'kafi perush haram mipadwa b'tshuva sha'anu noagin l'shaer b'shishim neged hazvuv omnam hamekel somech adivrei rokeach lo hefsid ad kanashana. Miu im hotzi im akaf. So he says, first of all, he says we are machmir, says the Maharam mipadua, but if you are mekel like the rokeach, then that's okay. But we're not. It's not the minhag. Miu im hotzi im hakaf dag tameh. What if you took out a dag tameh? That's not a zvuv. Oh, shar isurim sheyesh botam, or other ones that have a real flavor. Asur lachzira kaf l'kedera. You can't put the spoon back into the pot. V'imavarach nisol l'sham ein tzarich l'shaer shishim keneged kol hakaf. Rak neged isur shehotzi bo. The lo amrinan gabe kli chana. So he says you don't have to measure against the whole spoon. You just have to measure against the absorbed in it because there's no hanan and keli. Okay, so anyway, what we see here is just an interesting thing, that even though in Siman 104 we said that a fly gives a pagam flavor, here we're seeing that's not the minhag. The minhag is to view a fly l'chumrah. So let's go back to the Ramah and see what the Ramah says. So our bracketed words in the Ramah written by the Ramah. Yes, more or less, I would say.
Like when it says dat small and then explains it, it sounds like someone else is commenting on that.
Where are you seeing?
It says
dat atzmo. Well, let's read it. Let's read it. Each one you have to check on your own. Sometimes they are. Put it that way. You would think that they're not, but sometimes they are. So let's. Who was somebody reading? Oh yeah, Asher. Why don't you? Sorry, not Asher. Andre. Why don't you continue?
וכן המנהג פשוט אף על גב דייש מחמירין דברי המקילין, עיקר ואין לשנות המנהג, ואם לקח עם הכף דג טמא מן הקדרה, או שאר דבר שאינו פוגם, אסור...
Wait, stop for a second. First part, he says, the prevalent custom is v'ken haminhag hapashut, that it's mutar. He says that is the custom. Af agav the yesh machmir, even though there are some that machmir, divrei making ikar. By the way, the shach in Kuf Dalet, shach hey, says that the flavor, or sorry, I don't think it's shach hey, I think it's sif hey. He says that the flavor of a fly is only bad in wine, oil, and honey. But the minhag is lakula, like the Ramah is saying. Okay. Vein l'shot minhag. Ve'im lakach. So that's the first part that he's saying. He's sort of contradicting what he said in the Darkei Moshe, right? Didn't he say in Darkei Moshe that the minhag is to be machmir? Didn't he seem to say that?
That was quoting Maram Padua. He was not necessarily.
No, the second part was quoting. Wait, the second, but where I started was also was that also quoting? In the middle, he quoted Maram Rottenberg. What about the first part? Second, let me check again. Well, we didn't read all the Darkei Moshe, so it's not fair to say anything about his conclusion. Just a second.
I think he was
He's quoting the
Isser
Mordechai.
Behet.
He's quoting the Mordechai in the beginning.
The Mordechai's the Mekil, though, I think, right? And then, right, he says there's no Tom for his Vuv, and then it's the Isser Veheter who is, who makes the Kafasur.
So how does he end? He doesn't end. He doesn't conclude, you're saying, in the end.
I don't think so.
Right. So he just brings the opinions. Okay, fine. So here he seems to be being Mekil. So then, all right, so go on, Andre. Read the end there.
ואם לקח עם הכף דג טמא מן הקדרה, או שאר דבר שאינו פוגם, אסור להחזיר הכף לקדרה, ואם החזירו, צריך 60 מן הקדרה נגד האיסור, ולא נגד כל הכף.
In other words, we don't say Hanan. If you took it out, for example, with a carrot, then the carrot would be usser. Because you took it out with this and the whole carrot, and then you put this carrot in some other soup, you need 60 against the whole carrot. But since you took it out with a spoon, you don't need 60 against the whole spoon, just against the actual fly, because there's no Hanan in Keli.
אבל אם היה מעט מן התבשיל עם האיסור בכף ואוחזר לקדרה, צריך 60 גם נגד מעט התבשיל. דהרי נעשה נבלה בכף.
So he's saying that when you take out the fly with a little bit of soup, the little bit of soup around the fly is now doesn't have 60 against the fly. But why does he say that? Because we just said that the fly has a tam l'fgam. This doesn't make sense, right? Why do you need 60 against the spoon? Even
He's
the
talking about when you.
because it's not talking about a fly.
Fish.
Right, we're talking about the fish.
Easter fish.
We're talking about the fish, and the fish have a good flavor. So then the water that you took the fish out with also becomes nevela, and you need 60 against that water.
And you have to say the spoon is a kli rishon at that point.
Right. This gets into this famous question, which is the ladle considered a kli rishon or not?
Or like, as you're taking it out, you have stuff in the ladle within the kli. I mean, right? Is the ladle within the pot?
As the edges of the ladle start to rise, it's got the spoon in it, it's got the fish in it and the liquid, and it's in the pot, so it's like a kli rishon at that moment. Even though when you take it out, it becomes a kli sheni, but for a split second, it was a kli rishon. You could say that's interesting point. That's interesting. I never thought of that.
I didn't make it up. I got it from the Shach, but
No. The idea that it's a kli rishon instant for a moment.
Yavi's idea is interesting, not mine.
Yavi's idea is interesting.
Yeah, much more interesting than mine. So.
Yours idea is the Shach.
Yeah.
That's Zion? You're talking about Shach Zion?
Yeah.
So let's look at Shach Zion. When do you read Shach Zion to us?
All right. Zarei nase nevela bechaf. De anu machzikin hakaf hishata kemo hakdera atzma me'achar sheotzia ata me'hakdera rotachat v'chashiv kli rishon l'chumra. Kach katav b'yisur v'heter klal kaf zayin. I don't remember how you organize it. Devar bet, whatever it is. Ulinyan izvuvo ser betamo hiskim harav le'machaber v'siato le'atir.
Continue. Wait, so first of all, the first part we said was what? The chashiv kli rishon l'chumra.
Which
it is
kli rishon, it's like teetering on a kli rishon, so we're going to take it to be machmer about it, right? It's And the second question is whether or not this will still apply to a fly, right?
Right. So listen to this. This is important. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. Ulian izvuv oser betamo hiskim harav lemachaber v'siato le'atir aval tema derei rabua poskim rishonim v'achronim le'isur v'chach katav v'isur v'heter.
Which the Darkei Moshe brought. Right. He was aware of them. He was aware of them.
But v'chach katav v'isur v'heter klal kaf zayin dechein noagim v'chach katav maram padua. Dechein noagim v'chach katav marshal be'isur v'heter shelo u'b'sifro perek gira nashe siman memtet mikabalat maharash dechein noagim. All right, so he's got all these people who think that actually we're machmir, but in that case, mihu b'makom have said mirubeh o shata dachak uchai gavne nireh dat maharam padua b'tshuva le'atir v'chach geresh abach mihu b'chala v'shichra l'kuli alma.
That's what we said before. That's what I said before. B'chala v'shichra, in other words, in
beer and vinegar.
Right. In liquor, l'kuli alma asur. Commotion be'er b'siman b'sof siman kuf dalet, which is sif hey. I think it's shach sif. He writes here sif gimel. I think it's shach hey over there. So in other words, he's actually, even though we were very happy and said, oh yeah, fly, nothing, it's pagum. The Machaber and the Ramah agree, and here's one of your places where the shach says no. The halacha is only in hefsed meruba can you be mekel. Really, a fly is gonna oser. Of course, so that means that halacha l'maisa, if a fly falls into your soup, better take it out with a plastic spoon, right? Better take it out with a plastic spoon and throw the spoon away, or take it out with a fleshik spoon, and then you're gonna have to kasher the spoon. It's not a hefsed meruba. That would be the lachatchil. That would be the din that the shach is saying, which is interesting because if you just read the Shulchan Aruch, you say, well, who would argue? You get the Mechaber and the Ramah. Okay, so that's I think we saw pretty much what I wanted to show. Anyone have any questions or things they read that they want to look at, that they didn't understand or that they want to discuss?
Just to clarify on that last point with the shach, if the fly falls in, he's fine with you to take it and you're fine. He
Assuming
agrees
that you
with
have
that, even
60.
yeah, assuming you have 60.
Yeah, but to take out the fly in the soup is fine. Yeah.
Right. For the
But-
Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah, it doesn't indicate that you need 60 though. Is that just an assumption?
No, the Shulchan Aruch, they're making even
It's, for them, it's
without 60.
it was in Kuf Dalet, it was just rove, right? If as long as you have
Right.
rove over the fly that's melted, that's dissolved, that's the word I'm looking for, into your soup, you're fine. Be a pretty big fly.
Got it.
You're talking about the mamashut of the fly. Uh-huh. Well, what did the Maharami Mipadua say? You're saying that there's not a rove against the fly in the spoon?
No, I'm talking about just the fly drops into the dish. Do you need? It seems from the
Which dish? Wait,
right.
dish or pot?
pot. You need 60. The dish you just pull out, right?
That's what I was saying. Yes, the dish, the soup bowl, you can just pull out because
Right.
it's not cooking.
His chomer of Hesed Meruba only applies with the spoon.
Right. Which is kind of weird because what would the case be? Well, how could you ever
No,
have a Hesed Meruba?
I mean, shouldn't
a
it
spoon.
also depend on the?
But I want to look at the. No, it says shishim. He definitely says shishim. I'm looking at the Darkei Moshe again. He says no ashanu nogim l'sha'er b'shishim neged azvuv. Not rove.
Yeah, I mean, he does. The Mechaber seems to think even in the Kli Rishon that you only need rove. From the in Kuf Dalet.
Right. That's exactly the point. The Mechaber thinks it's tam with gam, and why do you need rove at all? Because you need to determine what this thing is, what this mixture is. Is the mixture fly soup or chicken soup? If it's mostly fly, then you can't eat it, even though it's pagum, because it's like you're eating a fly. But
That was the
that's why you need rove.
Yeah.
That's assuming that the fly is pagum. But the Maharam Mipada was saying it's not, it's good flavor, and therefore you need 60 against it, not rove. Presumably you'll have 60 in a soup.
But we have seen the idea though that koshering a dish might be a hefsed. Right? In Devar Sheshel Matirin, that was something we talked about. That Well, no, hefsed meruba is another.
There we were talking about like a conceptual problem that it's not called Devar Sheshel Matirin if I need to do a pu'ula in order to create the heter. And a pu'ula could be even something as simple as koshering something. But here we're talking about only in a hefsed meruba where you really lose something significant could you be lenient, says the Shach.
Only spoon for, you have guests coming for Shabbat, and it's a spoon that, you have 10 spoons and you have 10 guests or something like that.
Right.
Exactly. With the Hesed Meruba, it's gone. It's gone.
If you don't have a plastic spoon and you only have one ladle and your guests are coming and you need your ladle, and you can only take it out with your ladle or something like that. Yeah. Here's an interesting case. Could you use a milchik spoon to take it out? Just so that you could save your fleshik spoon so that you can use the milchik spoon you kasher after Shabbat.
You're destroying the foundations of society. That itself is a Hesed Meruba.
Anyway, the best solution is have a plastic spoon. But it's interesting. I'm just saying, it's interesting to see this chomer. I always like to have things, everything is not so simple. We say a fly is pagu, is nothing tam lifga, but here we see maybe it is a problem, a fly. And that maybe there is a minhag like that. There were rabbis in the, I don't know when the Maharam of Padua was, let's say in the 16th century, who were saying, no, this is not the Jewish custom. Treat a fly as it's not kosher. You've been quoted. You have been quoted, Rabbi Landis. But anyway, yeah, it's an interesting question to take a milking spoon. You might be able to do that because whatever you would use would become non-kosher. So you may as well use the milking one. And then the only question is if you have 60 against, is that called mevatli yisur latchila? So if the spoon is a eno ben yomo, maybe it's permitted.
Eno ben yomo should be no problem.
Right. You'll just kasha your spoon afterwards. I always keep a couple spoons. What?
Sorry, wasn't there also an issue if the spoon is all, for example, the whole thing is metal as opposed to just the metal cup and a wooden handle, because then the spoon, it could still be batel b'shishim with the spoon, depending on the size of the spoon, if it's all one material. Wasn't that something that the Torah brought up on this thief?
You're saying that
like let's say for example, I've got a spoon with a plastic handle but a metal cuff. So then I use that spoon to take out the fly. It's not going to be batel b'shishim because the metal cuff is just a smaller thing. But if I've got this large spoon that's all one big thing of metal,
yeah,
then this move is still batel b'shishim within the spoon.
Well, not necessarily. We don't.
And I thought that's what the Torah was referring to when I was reading it.
I didn't. Well, anyone want to comment on that? I didn't think so. Let's look at the tour a second. You want to look at the tour? In other words, we don't necessarily say that if this is a whole discussion about stirring with the spoon and whether the whole spoon counts or whether. Remember, we learned from the Korban Pesach that the spit, if it's a metal spit, then it's like if part of it is heated up, then the whole thing is heated up. But we said that doesn't necessarily mean that the flavor goes to the parts of the spoon that didn't touch the food, even if it's all hot. It would only make sense if the spoon would be all hot and you'd be touching it with some kind of glove. And then but even then we don't say that the final maskana is that the flavor doesn't go everywhere. It just goes where it touches, even though the whole spoon, even though we say that if part of the spoon is hot, it's all hot. I don't think you can say that. But I'll look in the. I don't think you can say that the whole spoon counts against the fly unless you put the whole. Unless I'm wrong. The Torah says, "Yesh omrim zvuv o nimala shenimsa b'kedera v'hotzia b'kaf tzarich lezaher shelo lachzir v'liktov b'kaf b'kedera lefi shekvar ne'asar kaf." The kaf became usher from the zvuv, so don't put it back in. Kishahotzi bo hazvuv, just like the Maharam Maratenburg, Padua. Bo hazvuv me'akedera. The shema lo haya bo shishim kenegdo. If there's not 60 against what? Against the spoon, against the whole spoon, actually. We don't need to worry about this because we know that it's not more than a fly's worth of iser in the spoon. Balua bakaf. Ve'en tzarich shishim keneged kol akaf. We don't need 60 against the whole kaf. We only need 60 against that amount of flavor that the fly imparted to the maximum the size of the fly. In other words, we don't. Ein chanan b'kelim. Of course, the The Ramah has to say Ein Chanan Bekeli. The Tur doesn't need to say that. He says Ein Chanan. It's but Isuri. There's no Chanan at all. Okay, let's stop here. Next week is going to be about Reach and ovens, and we're going to have two weeks on the next Siman, and that'll start off with Joel will be giving next week.
Yeshkach.
Thank you. Okay, Laila
Thank
Tov,
you.
everybody.
Very much. Let us
Alright.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sarah.